Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Friday, and it's time for another edition of that, which we call Coffee with PC. As you know, we do it a couple times a week, and it's that time today, Friday. I got my cup of coffee. I trust that you do as well. I wanted to go to an Old Testament book this morning. One that's been on my mind of late. It's the book of Amos. We did a series on it's in the Minor Prophets, that second part of the prophetic books in the Old Testament. These shorter prophetic books, you've got Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, those longer books. Then there's several that are toward the end of the Old Testament that are usually shorter. Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, and on through Malachi. Those prophetic books. And the passage I want to look at today is in the book of Amos, Amos chapter 5. This verse 24, is probably pretty well known. This is what it says: "But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream." The poetry in that verse is very well known and rather striking in a good way about what it says. But if you back up, the context that leads to verse 24 is actually quite fascinating. If you go back to verse 21, this is Prophet Amos speaking for God, saying, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your song. I will not listen to the music of your harps. But then, verse 24, let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. A fascinating section, the contrast between the first half and the second half. And I read that today, and it's been on my mind lately, along with Micah, the verse that tells us that we should, what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, act humbly and act mercifully and walk humbly with your God. These ideas of justice seem to come to the forefront, particularly when we're confronted, as we have been in our culture and our country, with what's going on around us. A few weeks ago, it was a video of the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. This week, it was the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. These tragic events where African American men were killed. Just striking and heart-wrenching to watch. If you did, these videos that were played on social media and different places, disturbing to certainly see these things. And I think about that passage and the idea that at the heart of God's character is justice. At the heart of God's character is righteousness. And he says, let justice roll on like that river, righteousness like a never-flowing stream. And we see all around us, we see in our country, these acts of injustice that are troubling to us and troubling to me. It actually is the culmination in many ways of a journey that started several years ago, that I was challenged, and Denise as well, to consider the voices we were listening to, the diversity of voices. Primarily, were we listening to any African American voices? Were we listening to people of color? What we read and the preaching that I heard, in the theology works that I read, and I realized that I wasn't, and so I made a deliberate attempt to listen to those voices, because when we're confronted with these things like we have been these last few weeks, and even this week, as it's sort of kind of all-consuming right now on our news, that we need to hear, we need to feel what is going on in the African American community as these issues happen. Tony Evans said years ago that 11 a.m. on Sunday was the most segregated hour in America. And even as we see these events happen, that's probably evidence that might still be true by our reactions to them, the different ways we take it. But maybe we can, at the very least, do what the Scriptures call us to do and grieve with those who grieve. It's not, I don't pretend to have any fitting words. I don't pretend to know a lot about this. I'm learning. I need to learn more about the realities and the plight and the difficulties that our brothers and sisters of color face. And so all I can do is offer grief and sorrow for these things that they face and that they deal with in ways that I'll never understand. And so that's why I've tried over the last years to hear those voices. Even locally, I've sat down with a fellow pastor here in the Keys, Pastor Ralph Pratt, and asked him a few years ago when similar events were happening, a series of deaths that we heard about of African American men primarily. I said, Pastor, I just want to talk to you. I just want to know, teach me, tell me how you're feeling. Teach me, because I see it differently. I want to hear what you see. I want to hear and feel what you feel in this, and see if I can learn something about it. And so I did that, and it's been an interesting journey. It's been an eye-opening journey, and it's been a worthwhile journey as we see that these brothers and sisters of color are made in the image of God, and they have great value, and their voice needs to be heard, particularly as we, as a church and as a nation, deal with events like we're confronted with even this week. So that's why that passage in Amos was on my mind, because it reminds me that the heart of God is justice, the character of God is righteousness, and Amos the prophet says to the people of God who just went about their lives, their religious lives, even their festivals, their assemblies, their sacrifices, all of these things, their songs, that they just went about their life ignoring the injustice around them. And God says to them, I hate that. I hate your festivals in the light of what's going on around you, that you ignore these greater matters of justice and righteousness, and you just kind of keep doing your thing. And so I'm confronted with that in my life. How do I keep going through the religious motions and ignore the weightier matters of our culture, of our society all around us? And so I read this passage and I'm convicted by it, because I do want God's justice to roll. I want his righteousness to be like that never failing stream, not just to me, but to all people, and certainly considering the inequities in our country's past, to the people of color, people African American descent, and what they need to experience of the goodness and the justice and the righteousness of God, and to feel with them the pain that they have felt and continue to feel in incidents like we're seeing. I read a good book. Let me just close by recommending it. Michael Emerson, Christian Smith. It's called Divided by Faith. I think I'm going to pick it up again and read it. It's an interesting read that I read it and kind of had to back up and go over it. The subtitle is Evangelical Religion and the Problem of Race in America. And so it's one that was helpful to me and will be helpful again. I think I'm going to pick it up and read it again in light of current events, and maybe it will help me in my growth of trying to understand what God's justice and righteousness looks like in the face of the realities that many of our brothers and sisters in Christ face, that we certainly don't always understand. So hey, I know that's kind of a heavy thought today, this Friday Coffee with PC, but it's just been on my mind and kind of been in front of my face a lot lately, so wanted to mention that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for kind of joining me on these journeys, and I hope today, not sure I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there will be reactions whenever you bring up issues like this. It usually inspires a reaction, but let me say, I hope you'll just take time to think through and realize that we can learn from each other, and we need to learn from each other across the spectrum of our church as we all pursue the character of God, the justice of God, the righteousness of God that he's revealed ultimately through Jesus Christ. So I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining me. We'll be here Sunday, 11 a.m. is our 11 a.m. Boy, where did I go? 9 a.m. I don't know why I was thinking that. 9 a.m. is our service. We'll stream it on Facebook and on a couple other places, so hope you'll tune in then. Anyway, I hope you have a great Friday. Enjoy this day and the weekend that's ahead. Take care.